Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this incredible event worthy of a salon evening at Sue Dickinson's, but we will get to that later. I'm Jessica Shaw. I host EW Live on SiriusXM. I am overjoyed to be here with the creator and some of the cast of Dickinson, which has just begun its second season on Apple TV+. New episodes are airing every Friday. For the uninitiated, Dickinson is the genre-bending, hilariously anachronistic, soulfully beautiful, devastatingly romantic, and all too relevant story of 19th century poet Emily Dickinson and her crew. Season 1 was nominated for a Peabody Award and a GLAAD Media Award, and I'm thrilled to report I had zero willpower and watched every single second of Season 2 already, but I won't spoil anything. And Season 2 just brings this incredible show to new heights. So I want to welcome this wonderful panel: Alena Smith, creator, writer, exec producer; Hailee Steinfeld, Emily Dickinson herself, also an executive producer; Jane Krakowski, Mrs. Dickinson, the other Emily Dickinson, the first; Ella Hunt, who stars as Sue Dickinson; and Finn Jones, Mr. Sam Bowles. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here with everyone. Alena, I want to start with you. What was the plan going into season 2? What did you want to accomplish?
So I guess what was so exciting about going into season 2 is that there was a lot of work that had to be done in season 1, just sort of welcoming people in the door of this crazy show and getting them comfortable with sort of the rules of how our world works. And in season 2, we were able to sort of leap off of that foundation and really just go deeper into these characters and the story, without knowing that the audience would be already strapped in and along for the ride, basically. And I also think that, season 1 has this kind of rambunctious adolescent coming of age energy. Emily is mostly at odds with her parents. But in season 2, I think the show becomes more sophisticated and elevated and mature. And it's really about Emily stepping into the wider world of society and experiencing what it's like to be in the public eye. But, because this is Dickinson and she's Emily, all she has to do to sort of go to the big city is walk across the street to Sue and Austin's house, where they're hosting the most glamorous literary salons. So I was really excited to expand and elevate our world in season 2.
Hailee, I have to tell you, you just seem to melt right into this character in the very first second of the very first episode. So I was wondering, how was it going back and re-inhabiting Emily Dickinson for this season?
Thank you so much. I loved the opportunity of being able to come back to the same character and in the same space physically to sort of pick up not even where we left off, because we can imagine a lot happened in the intervening times between season 1 and 2. But I would say, I think there was a more confident approach creatively within all of us coming back into a season 2. There's definitely a confidence that comes with being given that opportunity. But very similar process, I feel, in developing Emily this time around, because she's in such a different headspace. And season 1 was about finding answers to a set of questions, and these questions are completely different than they were in season 1, but she's still searching for them. And in the midst, she gets caught up in quite a lot. And in this case, it's the pursuit of fame. And with that comes a downward spiral that is season 2.
Right. It all goes, spoiler alert, it all goes really well.
Yeah, exactly.
No issues whatsoever. I mean, Hailee, you just mentioned it, and Alena, you did too, that fame and what price fame is such a theme running through this entire season. And as I was watching, I thought, wow, that must be, for all of you, I mean, all of you must have experienced that at some point in your life, as people in front of a camera, in front of a spotlight, how am I going to cope with this? Do I want this? So did that run through your minds as you were preparing for this season?
I mean, Alena, we haven't spoken about this since, but we had so many conversations about that and about where Emily is and about fame itself. And it was very challenging for me to find, because that's such an internal struggle for anyone, and for Emily in this case, there was a lot that I would go to Alena about and simply just not understand what was taking place, as far as what Emily's point of view was on certain things, because of it being such an internal struggle, and trying to, find the answers myself as Hailee to questions that I've never asked myself. I've never thought much about fame. It's not really anything I've spent a great deal of time thinking about until this season of our show. But yeah, Alena, I mean, we had those conversations.
I think there's I think that, the issue cuts a little deeper than just the issue of fame. It really is about the issue of being seen, which is a much more loaded question for a woman, or for any type of marginalized person, than it is for a man. And as we know, the sort of central fact of Emily Dickinson's life is that she wasn't really seen for who she was until after she died. I think that, I think today, all of us, are experiencing, with the advent of social media, this constant, almost mundane day-to-day question of, do I put myself out there or not? Do I broadcast every minute of my life, to the world, or what part of me do I hold back? Right. And, I think it would be a mistake to characterize season 2 as about, being a woman who's hungry for fame. It's actually almost quite the opposite. Emily is being pushed into the spotlight for reasons that she doesn't completely understand, and finds herself needing to reclaim a part of her that really wants to stay hidden.
Yeah, and I think it's also such an interesting story about identity and who tells your story. And once you give of yourself, whether, maybe in Emily's case, if you hand over something that is such a part of you, a part of your blood and guts, and how does the power go into someone else's hand? And then do they define who you are? Which again is certainly something that women continue to have to deal with. And Alena, you brought up, how relevant social media is. Ella, good Lord, she is quite, I guess the 2021 kids would say she's an influencer. And in this world, and that too comes with good things and bad things and struggles. How did you approach playing her this season?
I mean, it was so fun to be introduced to Alena's scripts and see that she'd gone through this complete transformation. And with TV, normally you create a character in the first season and then you build on them in the following seasons. But I mean, this was just so not what I was expecting when I signed on to a TV show, and that Sue really does just completely transform into another person. And I think Sue's relationship to being an infamous hostess, socialite, is more complicated than she would have people, including herself, think it is. I think it really is about escaping from anything that makes her think or feel too deeply, including Emily, and throwing these elaborate parties and wearing these extraordinary dresses is all about kind of packing down the trauma of her past and the trauma that she's still processing by distraction. But it was also really fun looking at the history of female socialites from the 1700s in Paris to Kim Kardashian today, and looking at women in positions where their only way of having any kind of intellectual stimulation or power is through throwing elaborate parties. And certainly in 1850, a woman like Sue in an unhappy marriage, her only option, it's not like she can get a job, her only option is, if she wants that kind of energy in her life to become this person and to transform into someone that I don't think she naturally is.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
Jane?
and it's important, just real quick, but it's important to note that, in truth, Sue did transform after her marriage to Austin, and that Sue did become this. So, she transformed the Evergreens into this social hub of New England. And that's important to recognize because, Sue must have been a pretty brilliant woman herself, or else why would Emily Dickinson have cared what Sue thought of her poems? And I guarantee that she cared more what Sue thought than anybody else. The only instance that we have of Emily taking a note and changing something is because Sue gave her feedback on a poem. So these are both very strong women. Yeah, it was this poem called Safe in Their Alabaster Chambers.
And do you know what she changed? I'm curious about this. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently Sue told her to cut a stanza. Sue said that the second stanza didn't live up to the first. And, so that's pretty intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes. Sam Bowles also was literally an editor who Emily corresponded with, knew, I'm going to not talk the whole time because I'm like the research maven here, but this is also so important to understand the context and what we're talking about, that Emily ran from fame as much as she pursued it. Nothing would have been easier than for Emily Dickinson to publish. This guy ran a newspaper and was like all up in her business, being like, give me your work, and he believed in publishing women, unlike Edward, her father, who was opposed to it. So it's just so important to understand that like Emily had these opportunities, and the question we're asking is like, why didn't she take them?
Yes. And what does it mean to relinquish control? Jane, I have to just tell you, Mrs. Dickinson is just a whole new level of a blast this season. You are no stranger to playing women who I would say are committed to their truths, despite, for whatever reason, from 30 Rock to Kimmy Schmidt and Mrs. Dickinson. What do you love about this character? Because my list is long.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. Thank you so much. I was so drawn to the project because I thought it was going to be such a creative endeavor, and it has not disappointed in any way, shape, or form. And each season has changed so much. So I feel like we're still in this very creative process of making what is Alena Smith's Dickinson. This season for sure, as Mrs. D is probably the most conservative, most traditional character in this patriarchal society who wants to follow all of the rules. I think it's very fair to say that she is a much hotter, hornier Mrs. D this year. I think she's feeling a little bit of her empty nest syndrome, even though her children only moved across the yard or only upstairs. So, but I think I think it's really hilarious that she just wants to get some this year. And I think it's interesting that Alena says that it's about not only just about fame, about being seen, because I think the depth of Mrs. Dickinson this year is actually about being seen and appreciated and given her worth in whatever it is that she needs at the moment, whether it is throwing the perfect tea party or having sex with her husband again, or not feeling, having that emptiness feeling where they can still have that kind of relationship and feel young and in love, or perhaps just not being addressed as mother from her lover.
Yes, it's so Mike Pence. It's
a really simple request.
It's one of my favorite lines, Alena, because I really don't understand how you had a sexual partner that you had many children and a sex life with, but you still addressed each other as mother and father.
Not that we've ever heard about anyone doing that in the 21st century, but yeah.
No. Finn, good Lord, how you burst onto this show as Mr. Sam Bowles, the newspaper man, as Alena said, who's just dying to publish Emily Dickinson. What did Alena tell you about this who was an actual person in Emily Dickinson's life and in publishing? What did you know about him? But before you answer, I want to just play a quick clip of when we get to meet you on Dickinson.
Mr. Bowles, you're here.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. How are you, Susie? What's new?
Sam, I'd like you to meet my sister-in-law, Emily Dickinson.
Of course. The famous poet. I've heard all about you.
Oh, nobody's heard of me.
Well, it's my job to know things before other people find out. I'm a newsman. I gotta keep my ear to the ground, gotta stay one step ahead. The world is changing fast, and so is the news business, I'll tell you. What's all over your face?
Oh, it's ink.
Huh. You're interesting. I'm interested.
I guess what I found interesting about the character was how the character draws parallels to some of the big tech tycoons of the day, similar to maybe like a Mark Zuckerberg, or someone that I really looked into was Jack Dorsey, the guy that runs Twitter. And it's really interesting how these pretty young, fairly liberal men are controlling a lot of the discourse in this new technology, which is giving news to people. So I found that a really interesting parallel between him and Sam Bowles. And after I read the first couple of episodes of the second season, I just loved how relatable, even though the script was, set in the 18th century, the dialogue and the characters were just so immediately relatable. And especially Sam. I loved the fact that Sam was a man of dualities, like he wasn't just this kind of like patriarchal, like boogeyman, like there was levels of depth to him that could be drawn out. And I thought it was super interesting. It was fun as well. It was like, there was moments of like lightheartedness and that was really nice to come in and play with everyone and such a wonderful welcoming cast. I had a great time.
Did you all haze Finn when he joined the cast?
Yeah, we made him put on a corset for at least 10 hours for one day to understand how it was to be a woman in that time period.
No, we just force-fed him food. He just was eating the whole time.
Oh, right.
I will never forget how many grapes you ate that one afternoon.
Yeah, there was a lot of grapes.
There's a lot of grapes.
I love it. I mean, Hailee, how would you describe the relationship between Sam and Emily? Because I like Finn just said, it's not this sort of cut and dry, here's who this person is in her life. There's so much, there's a complexity there.
Absolutely. No, I think, and going back to what remains a, theme of all of Dickinson, Alena and Jane have both mentioned being seen and being understood. And being heard. And right now, when Emily meets Sam, she's sort of lost too. And so there's this new person that's been put in front of her that she thinks, oh, well, this person is showing me attention and taking interest in me, possibly personally, but professionally. And there's a real intrigue and mystery that is Sam Bowles. And Emily is just determined. She's constantly working to figure it out. Whether his intentions are strictly professional. She loves the idea of him and what he has to offer. The relationship between Emily and Sam is a very layered and complex one that I loved playing through with Finn. And it was definitely an evolving relationship as far as the process of filming it anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Alena, I just to rewind even back to season 1, I'm curious about your process and how much even the cast knows about this. Do you have your list of poems and then you say, okay, this one's going to be in the first episode, this one's going to be in the fourth, here's the one we're ending the season on? How do you decide, and do those inform what the episode is going to be about?
So it can happen in a number of different ways, because I feel like what's so wonderful about this project is that it's almost like I have this giant, delicious box of scraps that I get to dig through. And those scraps include Emily's poems. They also include facts about Emily's life. They also include freaky 19th century literary canon figures like Edgar Allan Poe and Louisa May Alcott. They also include, political, like science and literary critiques of the literature and culture of the time, and also everything going on in our world today, So I would say that, sometimes a poem, I keep a list of the lines that I love. I have all my Dickinson books behind me right now, but like I keep this list, right? And Emily has so many poems. I mean, I've been immersed in this for 7 or 8 years, and I'm always finding new poems of hers. And I mean, that's what's so astounding about what she did. So, sometimes there will be a poem that I think, well, that image is so evocative and that line is so fabulous that we have to find a way to make an episode out of it. But sometimes I'll have an idea for an episode and then I'll have to go rooting through the archive and the poems in order to find a great line to match. So it can happen in a lot of different ways.
Okay, who got like the collected works as soon as you got cast? Yeah.
It suddenly became a gift, like a congratulations on the part. And my apartment very quickly filled up with, I'm a huge fan of coffee table books, and my whole apartment is all Emily and Emily's work. But yeah, I definitely did.
Yeah,
me too.
My dad collects first editions, and when I got the part, he was like, "Well, I can't get you a first edition of Emily, but I've gone online and I've seen that actually." He came upstairs. He was so excited at in his research into Emily's life, because kind of crazily, the first full edition of Emily's poems didn't come out till, Alena, you might know this better than me, 1920, 1930, like way after she died. And so I have a beautiful big block of a first edition of the first full edition of Emily poems that I just like, it's like my shrine to her. And I just every morning wake up and say, "Oh, hello, Emily."
Alena is already plotting how to break into your home right now and get them to add to her shelf.
No, Alena keeps receiving Emily Dickinson socks as gifts. And I'm like, guys, if I started wearing Emily Dickinson socks, I think that would really take this over the line. So I've been re-gifting. Sorry to anyone who might be watching that gave me the socks. I've been re-gifting.
I'll take them.
Okay, really wants
Sorry
the
to
socks.
anyone who gave them to you, but you're welcome to anyone who got them. I have to tell you, Emily Dickinson, I mean, I love this show, but even as a fan of her poetry, there's a kind of relevance to this past year of, I mean, she was famously, she didn't like leaving home too much. And there was something very 2020 in lockdown. I found myself going back and reading some of her poetry, and I was wondering if you all did too.
I am forever fascinated by Alena's ability to almost foresee the future through this show. Yeah, going through this whole crazy last year that we've all gone through, I definitely found that one thing I love about Emily's poems is I find I have to read them more than a handful of times to understand them, truly. And I find that each time you read them, you can give them a different meaning. Much like music, it can represent a certain feeling that you're having in that moment, a situation you're going through. And going back through some of her poems in quarantine, there was a new sort of meaning I feel like I picked up on, and more so just imagining her writing them in our sort of current state. I spent a lot of time in one room in my house, working and trying to stay creative, and thought about her a lot, and definitely picked up some of those poems, and then, working on finalizing stuff with season 2, just kind of appreciating her and her ability to maintain creativity and some sort of freedom within her brain and imagination in isolation.
I think
Yeah.
it also changes when you read them. I feel like I was exposed to a lot of Emily Dickinson's poems in my childhood, and I took them on a much more surface level, obviously, and didn't see the depth and the sensuality and the sexuality and the beauty in all of her words. And now that I'm revisiting all of her poems through this project and as an adult and the world that we're in currently, I think they take on such greater meaning and so much more depth. And I think what a wonderful poet should do, like Emily Dickinson, is that the poems should shift as you shift as a person. And they absolutely do that for me. The quarantining also for me, I've come to realize I found the one thing I have in common with my character, because I'm so different than my character. But I feel like I found because we've been in our homes so much, I've realized that I need the order and the cleanliness of my home to make my brain work. As we were home and my house would get messier or more cluttered, and we're using our homes for everything, our office, our show business platform, our workout spaces, everything.
Yes.
School, yes, school. Kitchen, which I didn't know my kitchen worked until quarantine. Unlike Mrs. D. But I found out, like, I have appreciation now for the keeping your home kept and learning how my mind actually needs that to work. I need my home to be uncluttered for my brain to be uncluttered.
One of my jokes about Dickinson is that, like, it's a family show, but it's also a workplace show, because for Emily, Mrs. D, Maggie, Sue, Lavinia, all the women, that was where they had to do all the work. So
that's hilarious, Alena. I never knew you saw it that way, but that is so true.
When Maggie comes in, Mrs. D is pissed because there's a new coworker that she doesn't trust, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Alena,
totally.
there were certain episodes, there were certain lines in different episodes that kind of took my breath away at how relevant they felt, in some ways because of the tragedy of this past year or past, month. And in some ways with the poignancy of different things that had happened as you were, probably in like the post and editing stuff. Did you think to yourself, oh, good Lord, I am a fortune teller?
Yeah, I mean, it is it is insane, because we wrote season 2, in the spring of 2019, in the spring and summer of 2019, and it was all finished like way before season 1 even came out. And I guess all I would say is that, like, we're living through a moment right now, perhaps, where a lot of stuff is rising to the surface, but it was all buried before. So, you can, I was at a Black Lives Matter rally in Los Angeles in 2014. This isn't like, I just think that, Trump was elected in 2016. Like, social media has been coursing through our world like this force changing everything about sociological structures. And what's wild about the pandemic is that it's like before we would say, like, oh my God, it's like I live online. And now it's like I live online. Like, I want to express, like, grief that we're not actually at the 92nd Street Y right now, which is like, I would have loved to really be there. And instead, like, as Jane said, it's like, we're at home and, like, my kids just went to school and, it's like, there's the intensity of it. And so this is wild because it makes Emily Dickinson, like, even more of an icon for this moment. Because she, her life was lived so intensely inside. And it's really profound. And of course, also, two things. One is, her queerness, the ways in which, like, we're only now excavating and understanding that. Also, like, I knew coming into this show that if you said you were going to make a TV show about a white family living in the years leading up to the Civil War, like, you were being, you were biting off a lot, and if you're talking about somebody who wasn't seen for who she was, you better find a way, and you better find space to include as many people as possible into that world. And, that's been a journey for me in the show is learning just more and more and more about like who gets to be in the center, who gets listened to, who, in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the writer's room. Going into season 3, we are even more going to be rooting ourselves in, I guess what I would say is this. I started the show thinking a lot about gender and thinking about race as well. I now have come to the conclusion that like when you're talking about American history, you're talking about race. And like that actually has to come first. But this is a show about Emily Dickinson, so it's very complicated. But yeah.
Yeah, and I love the storylines with Henry and Hattie. I love Io Adebury. She's amazing. She's so funny, and I love the storyline of abolitionist writings, and I thought that was so just relevant and just a great part of the season. And as a viewer, I was really I was grateful, like you said, whose stories are told and who gets to tell their story. And I was grateful that their stories were told.
Yeah, though not as much as they should be. Like we need to keep doing it more. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I was curious. I mean, Hailee, tell me about it, and Alena, about threading that. God, that is a tiny needle of how you make a show, find that tone and find that balance between doing a show about a 19th century, poet and family and salon and newspaper man and all these things, while also being incredibly contemporary. How do you find that because good Lord, it can go wrong so quickly, and God, it never does.
Thank you. I mean, Alena, you created the thing. I just got to step into it. I think, obviously finding it was a bit of a process. And for me, one of the biggest challenges, I'd say more so with season 1 and developing the tone of the show, was having new directors come in every 2 episodes. I learned to love it, and it's now one of my favorite things about working on this show, getting a fresh new perspective every couple of weeks. But I found it to be a bit of a challenge when you're trying to find, specifics in detail, and you're trying to figure that out with quite a few people. Luckily, one thing that Alena, this is stuck with me. Alena had said to me before we even started filming, the 2 of us went and had dinner in New York. And she mentioned that directors are going to come and they're going to go, but you and I are here to stay. And that's one thing that won't change. And so having Alena, with the clear view of what this show is, was what helped really nail the tone, ultimately. But having this incredible cast come in and having this show feel like a real, at the end of the day, collaboration, because there is no dysfunctional Dickinson family and show without all of us figuring it out together. So, but Alena, I'm sure you can speak a lot to as far as how you wrote it.
Listen, we couldn't thread that needle without Hailee Steinfeld in the driver's seat of this cast. And, it really, every show is defined by that person who like sets the tone and sets the work ethic. And, but it's so funny. I have found myself saying in interviews, like, I feel like we have this tendency to like only compare female actors to other female actors or something. But I'm like, Hailee needs to be being compared to like Matt Damon. Like Hailee needs to be being compared to Adam Driver. Like Hailee is the bomb. Like she, it's like, this is a powerhouse. And the fact that she's
really
able to come
everyone around her.
Yeah. And it's like, there's, look, this show would be different if you had somebody who could only do one of the things that the show was asking them to do. And Hailee can do all the things So, we all get to go on it. And I just feel so fortunate because, also as the creator and showrunner, I have to spend so much time watching every second of this thing over and over and over again. And it never gets boring watching Hailee. It just never does. So it's amazing. It's amazing.
I want to just, yes, 1,000 times yes. I want to go back to something, Jane, you said a second ago, where you talked about Mrs. D and just like how she wants to, she really wants to get it, and she deserves to get it this season. And Alena, what you just talked about the queerness of this of Emily and of the show, and just God, it is such a relief. And Ella and Hailee and Jane, I'm sure you've had this a billion times where you're asked to play a woman who's like scared of sexuality or timid, and this must be such a joy and relief to get to just play a woman who's not being written in a way that is utterly unrealistic.
Even I didn't know that Mrs. Dickinson was going to hump the bedpost and Helen Morgan for her sea captain.
Spoilers, Alena.
No. We're in episode 4 when this comes out.
Let's talk about that. The bedpost.
Just teasing you.
I know.
Was that an improvised moment?
I, the actress, didn't know I was going to be doing that as well.
Yeah, you did, Jane. Yeah, you did.
Wait, Jane, it was also Jane's birthday when we shot that. Yeah.
Did you improvise that moment, that bedpost moment?
Was the bedpost part of it, or was that my idea?
No, Jane, you created that, and it was also her birthday. It was also her birthday. It was such a special day for Mrs. Dickinson.
It was my birthday. My favorite. I do enjoy that scene because I remember when Alena told me we were going to be doing it, I was like, am I already doing Blithe Spirit, like on the road? Like I didn't understand what was happening in my character. I thought I was going to the Blithe Spirit section of my career. But,
I'm always ready to do Blithe Spirit.
My favorite part is Toby is literally, who plays Mr. Dickinson, is in bed silent the entire time. I was like, did Toby ever look? Like he had to hear me doing all this. Did he ever peek? Or was he just
Did he just have like one eye open?
Yeah.
Right. Or even better, he'll watch the episode. He'll watch the episode and say, oh my God, is that what she was doing? I want to play another clip of Mrs. Dickinson. Also, Toby's in a bit of a precarious situation. And let's watch her decide how to handle it.
Oh, blessed day.
Hello? Hello? My name is Edward. I'm in a hole.
Edward?
Hello?
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 Edward?
Is that you, dear?
Hi.
Oh, you found me. Oh, thank heavens.
You fell in the hole.
I know that. I'm in a hole. Come get me out, for God's sake. Woman, well, help me out then, woman. What are you doing? Oh, no. Oh, ow, ow. What have you done?
I'm sorry. But we're having our discussion now, Edward, whether you like it or not.
Now is really not a good time.
Now is a perfect time. For once, you have no means of evading me.
Oh, I never evade you, Mother.
Edward, I swear, if you call me Mother one more time, I will bury the two of us together in this hole.
I mean, Ella, Hailee, tell me about what it's like to get to play sexually empowered women, just straight up. Is it just such a joy and relief?
Awesome. It's so awesome. Also, I don't know about you, Hailee, but I've certainly felt, and Alena and I had some conversations about this at the beginning of shooting this season, but how empowering the show has been for me personally in my development as a 22-year-old girl. And when I got the show, I was 20. In
19. You were 19.
22.
You were 19, Ella.
Was I 19?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the show has been the show has been a huge part of my personal development, and actually has really empowered me not to be afraid of my own queerdom and my own sexuality. And it's one of the awesome things about living in this time that we live in, is that we don't, as women, have to pretend that we don't have a sex drive. And that is a huge part of our show, and certainly the tension between Emily and Sue. And it is unspoken, but so tacit and beautiful. And I love playing it.
I do think it's one of the most beautiful parts of this whole show is the relationship between Emily and Sue. And like you mentioned before, it's oftentimes sort of either mentioned, or you get sort of a little look into what a relationship could be or might be, but this is everything it can be. And we love to take it as far as we can. And I, as an actor, love that I can play through such a beautiful relationship that's unlike anything I've ever played on screen. And, from what we know of Emily's life, she had a relationship with Sue Gilbert, and she was her best friend and her confidant and her sister-in-law. But that, at the end of the day, this was somebody that understood somebody so unbelievably misunderstood by the people in her own home. And this was someone that loved her for who she was and was able to accept her for all her weirdness, and crazy, chaotic, emotionalness, all of it. She accepted her and loved her for who she was. And it's a really beautiful relationship that even through season 2, where they couldn't mentally and physically and even emotionally be further from each other, they still remain, that love between them still remains. And I believe that they are who they're meant to be when they are together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Sure.
So that beauty shows in your performances.
100%. Season 2, which by the way, every Friday, new episodes on Apple TV Plus of Dickinson. There's so many ambitious. There's an opera, without spoiling too much. There's a seance. There are multiple really awesome dance numbers. And I was wondering if we could go around and if you all could tell me what your favorite day on set shooting, or favorite scene, or even favorite line of season 2. Hailee,
no spoilers.
Why don't we start with you? No spoilers.
Oh, no, you're going to start with me? Don't start with me.
Okay,
definitely
Finn,
don't start with me.
Finn, let's start with you.
Finn, go.
Wow, it's hard because it sounds so cliched, but like every day was a joy that I came to set and worked. It was always really, really fun. But there was one day where me and you, Hailee, were playing Heads Up. Do you remember that day? We were like in the parlor, and there was just something about like the energy on set that day. And like what I loved about it is like we could, behind the scenes, we could all have fun and we could all connect. But then when we came to work, like we were in it and we cared about the performances. And just that day in particular for me really just glued it all together. We can produce good work, and behind the scenes we can like have fun and hang out. And I just thought it was a really special show because of that dynamic on and off screen.
Who won Heads Up?
I do remember now. It just came to me.
We were humming the song, right? And so
That's
it was
right.
it was one where like you would display the song and I'd have to hum it. It was pretty equal, I'd say.
We'll sell for that. It's probably me, but
yeah, you've got the footage
go
on the phone.
against
I'm sure
Hailee
you'll
and
find
singing
out.
a song, but like, yeah, you do you, sure.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Ella, how about you?
I don't know about you, Hailee, but and Jane, but the couple of weeks that we were shooting the spa episode was so funny. I love all of the women of the show getting an episode where we all got to be together, including Jessica Hetch, who is just phenomenal in the episode. Was so much fun. There's like a particular scene where we're all in these like baths just for our bottoms. And our legs are kind of out wide, and we're supposed to be like cleaning that area of our body. And also kind of Jessica is like having like a semi-orgasm while she's talking. And it was just like the most absurd scene to shoot. So yeah, that was probably one of my favorite days.
How about you, Jane?
I feel like I have a few from this season. My favorite acting scene and bonding scene was the one with Hailee, where we are in the spa and we are getting some sort of cocoon treatments. And then I think it's the first time we actually see Mrs. Dickinson do some good mothering and actually show that she can be a good mother to Emily. And I think it was a large growth moment for Mrs. D. And I love acting with Hailee because, like Ella said earlier, her work ethic and her talent is so big that it forces you to try your best and wants you to elevate your work to be as truthful as hers. And so I love getting to do scenes with her. And from the first scene I ever did within season 1 to everything we have shot, I feel she makes me better and makes me want to elevate my ability. And I greatly appreciate that in her. But my favorite scene is
pushes us to be fearless in our roles as well. Like as executive producer and as Emily, just to go further and go deeper and feel safer in the environment of this show.
Thank you.
My favorite scene as my favorite scene as a viewer though is there's I don't want to give a spoiler, but there's a big dance number later in the series too that I'm so obsessed with those stop movements those girls are doing. I do not know how to do them, and I need Alena to introduce me to them so I can learn how to do that, because I watched it 5 times over and over again.
So good.
And obsessed.
Yes.
Obsessed.
All right.
So look for that.
Noted.
To that.
Noted for future dance numbers for Mrs. D. I have to say my favorite episode of season 2 is our opera episode. And, there are, scenes between all the people, scenes between Hailee and Finn that blows me away, between Hailee and Ella that blows me away, between Jane and Toby that I think is like one of the most special Mr. and Mrs. D moments that we get to see. And it really was also a case with this opera episode, which was directed by Silas Howard, who has directed in both seasons of our show and is in season 3 going to be coming on as a producing director. It was at everyone reaching for their best, like we had real opera singers and the costumes kicked it up to another level, and the production design and just, everybody, and we have, our composers were involved. There's just every single person who's involved in making Dickinson what it is came together to make something that I think you could watch just that episode on its own and it could play as a satisfying piece of art. So I love it. And yeah, I'm really happy about it.
All right, Hailee, close us out.
Okay, so I have 2 that come to mind, and one is that dance sequence that Jane is referring to. And a fun fact about that, my choreographer that I've been working with on my touring and music side of things for years, Nick Demora, came on and choreographed that dance, Jane, so I can put you in touch with him.
Excellent. I have an in now. Okay, great.
And it was so amazing for me just to kind of see, in a way, I love when I have these sort of full circle moments in my career when I see one sort of enter the other or influence the other. And so to have Nick, who has influenced me in my life as an artist, so much come into our world of Dickinson that is so unlike anything him and I have ever done. I think it's safe to say, and unlike anything he's done himself too, to have him come was really amazing. And he created something so awesome and something that is so Dickinson at the end of the day. And that is that particular scene in a later episode. My second one is in our season finale, and I won't give too much away, but where Emily has a really, she sort of comes back to herself finally through having lost herself completely. She confronts Sam Bowles in this really amazing scene that I love so much, and that then turns into, again without spoiling much, where Emily ends up in our season finale, and that is a beautiful story that unfolds with Emily and Sue. So I guess that answer is in a nutshell, episode 10, as well as the dance sequence.
Spoiler. No.
Right. we won't spoil.
I know.
I have to let you guys go, even though I could touch you for hours because I love this show so dearly. But Alena, give me one word. I have like 4 seconds left with you all. So give me one word to describe season 3.
Oh, wow. Gosh, I would, unfortunately, the word that comes to mind is grief. They're in the war and they're processing a lot of grief. And it's still our show. But I would just say, enjoy the party seasons, because this ain't no party season. What's coming next? So I'm glad we got to make our glam, salon and opera and spa and everything before COVID, because I feel like we're going into something sad.
And again, I think, Alena, this is where you sometimes can predict the future based on real life. So
yeah.
Though about grief, I still cannot wait to see it. I love this show. Dickinson airs on Apple TV Plus. New episodes every Friday. I want to thank you all so much, Alena Smith, Hailee Steinfeld, Jane Krakowski, Ella Hunt, and Finn Jones. Thank you all so much for joining me, and thank you to everyone at 92Y and Apple TV Plus, and to all of you for tuning in.